What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's TV review of Dopesick, Episode 6, Hammer the Abused. This episode is directed by Patricia Riggen and written by Danny Strong. Now, of course, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming in next. If you like any of these videos, awesome. Hit that like button as well as commenting below any video that you watch, including this one. So Episode 6 is the kind of middle point or the kind of turning point of this entire series. We've hit the peak. Now we're going down the mountain. And this episode is kind of where Rick, Randy, and Bridgett start getting kind of all their information together to help them get their case strong against Purdue and kind of the adverse effects of everything that has caused ever since episode 1. And that once again, it's broken into parts. It goes back and forth between years. But once again, I'll talk about, particular characters in succession, and then we'll go from there. But this week, I wanted to start out with, of course, Fennix's character and, of course, Betsy's character. They're dealing with the adverse effects of this drug, Oxycontin. They're dealing with them in their own separate ways. We see, of course, Fennix in the rehab center. He is, as rehab centers do, they have people that talk it out, try to get everything out into the open, try to become clean, all that good stuff. And as we know from the last episode, this is a problem for Fennix because he doesn't feel, as he tells his kind of leader of the group in general, that he is somebody who doesn't feel that he's going to succeed after his 90 days. And his leader tries to tell him that everything that you do addiction-wise is going to have adverse effects even when you come clean, because the pain and the addiction is so strong that a lot of these people, as they say in the episode, they relapse back into the rehab center. And we hear about a story about unfortunately a young kid who was in the rehab center, and his friend were told that if they took bleach they get the drug out of the system, and his friend took bleach and he died, and now his friend's in rehab, or the other friend's in rehab, and it's just very depressing to hear about. And this is the kind of stuff you hear about, I'm sure, in rehab. Never been to rehab, but I'm pretty sure these are the kind of stories you hear about, and I'm sure it's truthful. I'm sure there is a little bit of fiction, but I'm sure for the most part they do get it pretty realistic. And once Fennix gets out of the rehab center, he's now in like a halfway house of some sort. His old nurse, Leia, who's working for another company now, visits Fennix, who's now relapsed back into using Oxycontin. He explains, and she's very sympathetic. She knows that he's going through a rough patch, a tough time. He talks about, even in his rehab, about how he ruined a lot of lives, and he ruined himself, and people died. We see the kid that overdosed at the beginning of one of the episodes. We see, of course, Betsy and all these people that have just become addicts, or they've died because of the addiction. And you can tell that he's very conflicted with what his character is. But she offers him like the ability to go to this clinic up in Knoxville, and he takes the opportunity. And you might be able to help me in the comments, but there's this drink he takes by the nurse, and it's like a red liquid. I think it's like a detox drink or something like that. But he takes it, and she's like, you have to come 7 days a week to constantly, keep supervision and stuff like that. And you can just tell he finally is trying to clear himself of this drug, but it's going to be a journey, I guess you could say. And it's really interesting to see what Michael Keaton does in this episode, because he goes from a guy who was really important to a town to becoming the addiction that he started to put out there. And to watch his character kind of progress it's a really fascinating character arc that really is a fascinating way to show an individual like Michael Keaton and what he's able to do as an actor. So I found that really fascinating. It's not perfect because I really feel like his character does go through some really strange things in his like character arc and stuff like that, but it really kind of, you see maybe this might possibly help him later on. And now we'll go into like Betsy's character to kind of go on the other side of the flip coin. We have Betsy, who is trying to stay clean. She's doing it through the grace of God with her parents, and it's not helping her. She goes out for running, but you could tell she still wants that drug. She wants to have that high and stuff like that, and she's doing the best she can. She runs, like I said, she constantly is around her family. She seems like she's doing better until she basically gets to a homeless encampment and she sees Walt again, and she asks for some Oxycontin. Well, Walt doesn't have Oxycontin, but he has something that's a little better, and that, of course, is heroin. Now, with that said, we know what heroin does. It's another opioid. It's another drug. It's another thing that kills people, and it's actually much more potent than I even think Oxycontin is. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but basically, she agrees to it, and I don't think she's going to make it through this series, to be fairly honest. I think she's going to die. I really do. I think this is the downward spiral that's going to continue, and either parents are going to disown her and she's going to die off somewhere, or she's going to die at her home, or she's going to die at the encampment. It's just, it's a really depressing thing to see, because all it started was her involved with an accident that hurt her back. Fennix prescribed Oxycontin and she got addicted. Like, they claimed that, as this episode starts to show, she claims that, you know, they claimed it wasn't addicted, and she's going to be a casualty of this drug epidemic. And, you know, like they say in the episode, you know, if people can't find oxy, they'll go to stuff like heroin, and there you go. So, but that's pretty much it on their stories. There's also a story of Lucas, who we see again, who was, I think that was the character that Bridgett talks to, and there's a story about him where he's at the drug clinic, he takes oxy, and he actually injects it and overdoses and dies. And, you know, we'll go into Bridget's stuff, but that's a really sad thing to see, because she knows she was trying to help him and stuff like that, and to see him overdose and die outside the clinic or outside the drugstore, it's not fun. This episode is really hard. It's like the last episode. It's really difficult to watch, because you're seeing so many stories and how it's playing out and how sad and depressing it is. And I know some people think this series is a little too over the top and really kind of forceful in what it's trying to do, but I think it really hits home, especially if you don't know anything about drug addiction and, you know, the Oxycontin addiction, how powerful and destructive it truly is and was. And, you know, I just learned the other day that, you know, Richard Sackler and his group got pardons or something like that, you know, honorable pardons. And man, it's hard to think that this thing is still a problem. And the series makes it hopeful, especially after this episode, that they're really going to go after Purdue. And I don't think that, as far as I've heard, I don't think that happens. But we'll talk about the Richard Sackler stuff. Richard he seems really off in this episode, and I don't mean like Michael Stuhlbarg's not knowing what he's doing, but in essence, he is now the CEO of the company, and his I want to say his second in command, Michael Friedman, is talking to him, and he explains how this guy named Jay McClaskey, who was the DA of Maine, how he says he's going to fight towards, you know, the OxyContin, how it's finally gotten out of control. And somehow Michael Friedman basically tells that they've been invited to the this kind of meeting of sorts with McCloskey, and he actually puts the screws to Richard Sackler's character, who seems really kind of strange and kind of just misplaced. And he's like, maybe Richard, you shouldn't go to this thing, because maybe we just need to kind of have it lawyers. We don't need you there to, you know, give us it almost feels like a eyesore of some sort. And Richard's only thing he wants out of Michael Friedman is to hammer the abuse. And what he means is to make it as powerful and as relevant to the point where the abuse is the problem. It's not the drug company. It's not the pill itself. It's the abuse from the addicts, from the addiction, all that stuff, from them, basically addicts taking the pills and just doing whatever they want with it instead of the people that actually need it. And so Michael Friedman talks to McCloskey with the other lawyers, and they somehow convince him, which leads into like the Rick and Randy stuff, as well as Bridget and stuff like that. But, you know, it really shows, it's really funny how Richard talks to his like old flame Vivian, and she's like really doesn't want to have anything to do with him, and he's having trouble with his wife, and he doesn't seem happy. And I don't know the exact extent, if he's like kind of regretting but the thing with the Oxycontin because it's making like $1 billion a year or whatever. I don't know, but it's just really weird, and it really kind of a strange performance from Michael Stuhlbarg in this episode. It's not saying it's bad, but it's just there's something there that is kind of missing from this episode, and maybe they'll explain it in like episode 7 or 8 or whatever. So, but that also coincides with the Billy stuff, and Billy's a person who, after talking to Fennix, is starting to see the downside and the real issues about how they were misled and mistrayed about this drug use, about this drug pill and stuff like that. He's seen the addicts, he's seen the people using it, and so therefore he's at a party that they put on for all these reps. We see, of course, the Phillipa character there and everything. He provokes one of the guys that he feels was barely promoting the drug, but somehow made a lot of money for the drug, and he provokes him, and he almost gets in a fight, and he has a fight with the Phillipa character and kind of walks off. That's really all it's about, but it's about a character who really really pushed something, didn't understand what he was pushing, and I don't really want to feel sorry for him, but you can see him making a turn to the point where he may talk to the grand jury and stuff like that to, you know, talk about what exactly happened. It's really showing you the adverse effects of being too young, too inexperienced, and willing to believe whatever you want to believe, and that's why he's acting the way he is, because he has regret, I guess you could say, and that's basically his story. It's not very much, it's like a couple minutes long, but it has a really important moment when it comes to his character. So, but then we'll get into the Rick and Randy stuff. What's really interesting about their character arc, and once again, is more, this episode actually deals more with Bridgett and the Fennix and of course Betsy stuff than it deals with anybody. But Rick and Randy talk to this woman, this person who can read charts really well, and she starts explaining how the blood oxygen level, or the blood stuff that involves Oxycontin, has a weird abnormality to it, where it feels like it was readjusted, it was like redone to a point where it made it look like there was a kind of a peak and valley situation where it has, you know, a level, but it's safe enough that it's not addicting. So Rick and Randy take that information to the individual who apparently approved this thing, where they are starting to question whether this like stuff was, you know, approved by FDA and stuff like that. And the individual they talk to is like a marketing manager in a lot of aspects for this company who you know, involved with like medical fields and stuff like that. And they show him the chart that the lady that was talking to him earlier, and he looks at it funny. Actually, his eyes go wide and he's really confused, so he kicks out all those people. He's like, where did you get this chart at? And they explain to him that they got it from the fact that this is being used to talk to doctors and reps and stuff like that. And when he finally sits down to talk to him, he's like, this chart's been manipulated. There's no way this drug peaks and valleys. Actually, we don't use that word because it's almost illegal in a lot of aspects. But he shows him, he's like, it would never do this. This is an opioid. It goes to major addiction levels. And they're like, so you guys didn't approve this? So like, no, we told Purdue we're not approving this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, okay. So Purdue and the FDA have been manipulating charts to sell drugs. That's a major problem when you think about it, because selling drugs and not giving truthful information is a criminal activity. It's criminal. You know, it's something people go to jail for. You know, it's amazing Purdue and Richard Sackler, none of these people went to jail for that. Or maybe they did. I don't know the whole story, but I know Richard Sackler didn't go to jail for it. And this gives them a lot of the information. This is the turning point for Rick and Randy to get their kind of, you know, story off the ground. They're like, hey, do you want to testify to the grand jury? He's like, the manager goes, hell yeah, I'll testify. This is wrong. So that's kind of a starting point for their kind of, you know, journey into the grand jury stuff. But it also leads into Bridgett stuff, where she's, you know, having issues with her husband. They're going through counseling. We know she has a divorce. I don't really think this stuff really even should be in the episode by now. I think once he got divorced, I don't know. I think it's trying to give her more story than what she has, but it's still a major part. You know, he agrees with her and stuff like that. And she goes back to the FDA and she shows them charts and stuff like that about, you know, people dying of addiction. And the FDA's, once again, we can't do anything. The drug works for millions of people. And they basically say that if you can prove that the drug is a major problem, then we will turn our story around. And she's like, so if I can guarantee to find information, and they're like, yeah, we don't want anybody hurt. I'm like, excuse me for a pause a second. I'm sitting here going, you guys know about this drug. We've had stories about the addiction, and the only way to tell you that this is a problem is to actually have data. This is a really bad look for the FDA, to be fairly honest. I didn't know the FDA was this much of a problem. I've heard stories in the last few years about the FDA and how much of a mess they are as a company and how they can be bought pretty easily. And that's what Purdue was doing, apparently, which is, I don't know how to think about that. But she goes and talks to the people that, you know, how, like doctors and stuff like that, who are working for her. And at first she's like, do whatever you need to do. as much information as you need. And the doctor's like, that's going to take forever. And she's like, do whatever you need. I will take forever to get this done. And at first, they don't find really much of anything. They find like 150 cases of overdosing, or at the most overdosing, which is not going to help them at all. And then she kind of walks away and she sees the article about Lucas, about him overdosing, and it breaks her heart. And it's really sad. It really is. She talks to her husband about how she tried to help him, and honestly, it doesn't work, and it didn't work for him. And she's like, I could have done something. He's like, there's not much you can do. The things you did were as good as you can do. And I understand where he's coming from. It's sad when you see people you know and love die of drug overdose and abuse and stuff like that. And she finally kind of, as she's in her bathroom, she sees, I think it was Vicodin or something like that her husband has. And it causes like a light bulb to go off in her head. And she calls back the guy who's helping her work on all the overdoses to give the FDA. And this is when she kind of says, are we able to find, natural taking of the Oxycontin and regular people and the overdoses and stuff like that. So it would say taking it orally instead of like the addiction level. And this is when they have a breakthrough, when they have over 450 cases, but they're going to have more. And basically it means that the majority people that were dying were of normal circumstances of this drug, where they were taking it normally, orally, like a pill orally, and they died because of the high accounts of like milligrams of the pill and stuff like that. And that's basically where the episode ends, is where it's going, I got you, MFFers. But it's I think she gets the most to do, but like I said, her story is kind of weak in a lot of places. But the fact that she's come to a aha, got you moment, it was kind of awesome. But I left the best for last, and take this for what it's worth. If you don't like me for saying this, whatever, it's just how I feel. So this episode is, taking place right after 9/11, or real close to 9/11, a few years after, and they've set up a memorial. And we all know who was the leader of New York City at the time. It was Rudy Giuliani. I have very strong feelings about Rudy Giuliani. We'll just say that. And she approaches him, or he approaches her. They have a nice little conversation. She lost a couple people in the Twin Towers and stuff like that. Well, I don't know much about Rudy Giuliani's history when it comes to lawyering and stuff like that, but Danny Strong obviously has strong feelings against Rudy Giuliani as well. And this moment when she's talking to him, and when he says, I'm going to represent Purdue Pharmaceuticals, is a strong representation of villainy of Rudy Giuliani. So take that for what it's worth. I know it depends on how you feel about the situation, but it was clearly a strike against Rudy Giuliani, a strike against his person and himself and his worth as a human being. And I could see it like daylight. It was pretty crazy to watch, but if he represented Purdue Pharmaceuticals, then he's had issues from the beginning. He's not a very good person. And anybody who's willing to go to bat for some really nasty corporation like Purdue, or we'll leave it at that, it's not a good situation. So I don't know how much truth there is to Rudy and the Purdue, but it seems very slimy to me. So anyways, that's pretty much the whole episode. Like I said, it's about the causality of everything that's happened to the people, especially Fennix and Betsy, how it doesn't really matter what they do. They seem to relapse every single time, which is the typical drug abuser situation. It's about the people in the system, including the DEA and the lawyers who are trying to do something good, always get caught in that red tape that constantly is bombarding them. They're constantly finding things that they can't get anybody to talk about. And here they're getting a little bit of light. So that means episode 7 will probably be a lot of information about Rick and Randy and Bridgett and what they need. Episode 8 is going to be the kind of collapse of everything, whether good or bad or however it works, but it's going to be the brick hitting the wall, and we'll see how that plays out when we get to episode 8. But I think the episode is good. I think it does stammer and stumble, and it feels a little dry sometimes, to be fairly honest. It's not the best episode. I think it's an episode that needs to happen just as a kind of starting off point for the last 2 episodes. It needs to be that dry episode, the episode that's not as great as everything else, because you need the setup, you need the chess pieces to get to their final moves before anything, and that's exactly what's happening here. So I still think the episode is like an 8.5 out of 10. I like it. I know a lot of people are kind of weird on this show when it comes to like its over craziness, when it comes to, you know, the bad company and blah blah blah, which, like, as we know, I'm sure there were some good people at Purdue Pharmaceuticals and still good people at Purdue. We're just seeing like the twirling mustache type Richard Sackler and stuff like that. So, but with that said, that's pretty much it. It's not really much else to tell on it. That's pretty much the explanation. It's gonna be interesting to see how episode 7 and eventually episode 8 play out, but there's gonna be a reckoning. I can guarantee you that. So, anyways, that'll do it. That'll be my take on Dopesick episode 6, which is, of course, Hammer the Abusers. In the comments below, as always, what did you think of the episode? Did you think it was a good episode, a bad episode? Overall thoughts? You guys have been giving me some great opinions on the episode in general, about your thoughts and how the episode's going, or at least the series is going, so keep at it. But otherwise, if you like the channel, awesome. Hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming in next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Dopesick. Peace out.